Hi, my name is Linda, and this is the story of how, as a Christian mom, I experienced the discovery that my son had cancer, my struggles with faith and emotions throughout, and where I'm at today, 2.5 years later. Unfortunately, there's no beautiful happy ending, because life after the death of a child is something you have to face every day. You don't just arrive at a place where you're fine now. In 2019, our lives were pretty good. We had 2 healthy sons who were just heading off to school. Curtis, at 19, to learn carpentry at college, and Connor, at 18, to University of Ontario to take engineering. Both boys had been looking forward to their independence for a very long time. Now my husband Craig and I had arrived at a new stage. We were just about to become empty nesters. Then one evening, October 3rd, 2019, everything changed. We got a call from Curtis saying he was at the ER getting checked out because he had a sore back and trouble breathing. An hour or 2 later, we got another call, this time saying that a large mass had been found behind Curtis's left lung. It was worrisome and needed to be biopsied. A hospital in Halifax could do that. It took about 3 weeks before we were able to get some answers. A thoracic surgeon called us one evening in late October with the results. The biopsy showed signs of being a synovial sarcoma, a type of cancer. He then said that the mass would need to be removed and that the surgery could be done in 2 weeks. Craig and I were just approaching our 25th wedding anniversary on November 19, and I'd been actively planning a cruise to celebrate. We canceled this and stayed home with our boy through his major surgery, hopeful that they could remove the mass and the cancer would be gone. After the surgery, we were told that they had not been able to remove all of the mass, so some treatments would be needed. We should wait for oncology, the cancer department, to contact us. Curtis's surgery was in early November, and it wasn't until a week before Christmas, 2019, when we finally got to sit down with the oncologist. We had prayed a lot during this time, reaching out to God for peace and healing. We were also lovingly and prayerfully supported by family and friends. That helped, but this was still a very difficult time. The oncologist explained that sarcomas are extremely aggressive and almost always return if they don't get every single molecule out. He said that because Curtis's sarcoma was attached to his ribs and lung wall, there was no way they could remove it. Nothing could be done, no treatments were recommended, and Curtis was going to die in a matter of months. We were shocked and devastated with this news. It was not what we were expected. I immediately emailed a sarcoma specialist from Toronto, and she said that she would see Curtis if we could bring him up there. So we took him up at the beginning of January, and we were so relieved that they were able to come up with hope and a plan to make Curtis better. A team of the best doctors available would be working on his case. What a huge answer to prayer. We were so happy. Curtis began his chemo treatments in mid-January. They were aggressive and lasted about 3 days in hospital for each treatment. In February, the Toronto surgeon said he would be willing to try surgery to remove the cancer in the summer, although there was only a very small chance that it would work. Our Halifax oncologist was shocked that anyone thought they could fix it. This was scary and confusing for us. We didn't understand why the Lord allowed all this uncertainty and pain. Where was the peace and comfort? Throughout the spring, because of COVID, Curtis had to go through some of his chemo treatments alone in the hospital. This was very hard on him and on us. We tried to focus on the joy through the good days when Curtis was feeling well between treatments. It was nice to have Connor back home doing his schoolwork online, and we were happy to have a full house again. We felt that God gave us encouragement through family and friends who sent messages, food, and gifts to cheer us up. For the first time in our lives, we had to rely completely on the Lord. We could not fix this problem ourselves, no matter what we did. July came and was terrible. Curtis's health deteriorated to the point where he was in almost constant pain and his breathing was very labored. I remember sitting on the couch next to him day after day, begging God to heal his body and take away his pain. Curtis was barely eating and the tumor had started growing again. Humanly speaking, it seemed impossible that he would be well enough for surgery. We were shocked but incredibly grateful when the surgeon said he would go ahead with the life-saving operation Curtis needed. This massive surgery was over 8 hours long, and they had to remove his entire left lung, some ribs, and part of his diaphragm. We prayed, and so many other people prayed, for the doctors and for Curtis during this time. And then we got the great news. The surgery was a success. What a huge answer to prayer again. Curtis was pronounced cancer-free and sent home to recover. During the fall of 2020, Curtis was told to go back to living a normal life, and his scan in October showed that he was still cancer-free. We were incredibly thankful, but still worried. We knew the rate that this cancer returned in people, and you can't just shut down the part of your brain that worries. In late fall, the Ontario specialist called to say that Curtis had qualified for a drug trial that would teach his body to identify and attack cancer cells. This is very promising, and she told us to go back up to Ontario in January for all the tests that the trial required. We flew up to Toronto near the end of January 2021 and made several trips to appointments at the Princess Margaret Hospital. After about 5 days of tests, I got a call from the specialist on the case. She said that Curtis's heart function had been damaged by all the cancer treatment, and he was no longer eligible for the drug trial. There was nothing more that they could do. She estimated he had 6 to 12 months to live. I was on the phone in complete shock. All the ups and downs of these past 15 months, and now we're being told for sure that all treatments had been exhausted and that our 20-year-old son was going to die. We had such high hopes with this drug trial that this news took us completely off guard. Again, we prayed, we cried, and we reached out for support and prayers. All over Canada and around the world, many people were praying for a miracle. We knew that God could raise Curtis back up to full health and strength if it was his will, but it seemed to become increasingly clear that this probably wasn't his plan. In March, we called Connor to come home and spend some time with his brother, and my sister Cindy came out to support us. Over the next few weeks, we watched our boy lose weight, lose energy, and sleep a lot more. He turned 21 on March 9. He should have had his whole life ahead of him. He wanted to marry and have a family. He had dreams and hopes for his future, and we had to help him come to terms with the fact that he was dying very soon, not in 6 to 12 months, and not even in 6 to 12 weeks. It was an extremely difficult time, the worst thing a parent could ever go through. Thankfully, we had help from palliative care and the amazing VON nurses that came to our home during this time. After watching him deteriorate for what felt like an eternity, we were thankful when, on April 5, 2021, God finally took Curtis home. We were relieved, no more pain. Curtis was finally at peace, healthy again, and at home with his Heavenly Father. About 2 weeks later, though, the trauma and doubts came roaring back. How could God be so mean? Why did Curtis have to suffer so much? He was living a life for the Lord. He could have done so much. Why him? Why not some other bratty kid who was making everyone's life miserable and whom we all knew the world could well live without? Now, I know this isn't a good thought, but it's what goes through your head at a time like this. Throughout the whole cancer experience and roller coaster of emotions, you start to think about everything you've been taught about God and prayer. Pray boldly, pray specifically, trust God, leave it with Him. After doing all that, our boy is dead, and all we could think about was why God allowed him to suffer so much, and why He didn't stop it despite us begging Him to over and over. We forgot about everything He did, and all we could remember was everything that He didn't do. Everyone's experience with trauma or loss is different, and so many wonder how God could allow terrible things to happen to people we love. I recently listened to a sermon that talked about how bad things happen to both Christians and non-Christians equally. This includes cancer, as well as accidents and so many other tragedies. As Christ followers, we are not exempt. Hearing this helped to remind me that God wasn't doing this to Curtis or doing this to us. He wasn't trying to prove a point. It's the unfortunate way that the world works. Terrible things happen. Romans 8:26 in the New International Version says, "We know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him." So even when terrible things happen in life, and they do, God is always working for good during those times, through the people who show up to help in so many different ways. Our family and friends did so much more for us during those difficult times than we could ever possibly thank them for. We were so blessed through cards, gifts, food, and prayers throughout our whole journey. I began to remember how the Lord led us to the specialist in Toronto who gave us an extra year with Curtis, and the surgeon who agreed to perform life-saving surgery when Curtis was so unwell in July. I remember the hugs and the time spent with Curtis during his treatments and the amazing nurses that we had. Now I think about Connor and what a blessing he is to Craig and me. Also, how helpful it was to stay with my sister Cindy in Toronto during all those necessary hospital stays. I've also been helped by reaching out to professionals like my nurse practitioner and my amazing therapist. In times of difficulty or crisis, help through medication and counseling can make a real difference. Now, in the fall of 2023, it's been 2.5 years since our boy passed away. There are and will continue to be days and weeks in the future that are a real struggle. So Craig and I will continue to focus on enjoying all the good days, especially our times together with Connor, and supporting each other during the bad days. We are both also intent on having and restoring a strong, growing relationship with the Lord. One day we will all be together again, and I'm looking forward to that so much.